Over the past 24 hours, tensions between the United States and Iran have escalated once again. U.S. military forces shot down an Iranian Shahed 139 drone that was approaching the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea. Although Iran claimed the drone was conducting reconnaissance and photography missions over international waters as part of a lawful operation, this did not prevent it from being targeted. In parallel with the U.S. action, Iranian speedboats attempted to seize an American oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. 6 Iranian boats, armed with .50 caliber machine guns, entered the strategically vital waterway and approached the tanker, demanding that the crew shut down the engines. The vessel instead increased speed and was soon escorted by a U.S. naval ship. These two incidents clearly demonstrate how high the risk of war in the region has become. However, what makes the situation particularly striking is that just 2 days from now, the two sides are scheduled to hold talks aimed at reducing tensions and resolving their disputes. Against this backdrop, the recent escalation may appear illogical at first glance. Yet this operation can be interpreted as a strategic move by Washington to showcase its strong military presence in the region and force Tehran to act cautiously at the negotiating table. Therefore, the current tension may be viewed as a calculated effort to increase diplomatic pressure, taking into account potential reactions from Iran's Revolutionary Guard and its allied proxy groups. It is increasingly evident that former U.S. President Donald Trump is wary of several possible escalation scenarios. In fact, Trump's renewed focus on Iran over the past month was initially triggered by mass protests that erupted in Tehran's Grand Bazaar in late December and later spread to other cities across the country. Trump publicly encouraged Iranians to continue protesting and promised that help was on the way. However, these calls failed to produce tangible results. Subsequently, the U.S. administration deployed the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln along with its supporting fighter jets as well as advanced air defense systems such as THAAD and Patriot missiles to the Middle East. As U.S. forces continued to build up, Trump warned Iran that refusal to comply would result in strikes even more devastating than the attacks carried out on Iranian nuclear facilities in June of last year. Yet the most significant response so far has been limited to the downing of drones. This suggests that Trump is reluctant to launch a full-scale military assault on Iran. U.S. leadership is well aware, based on deep military and intelligence assessments, that even physically defeating Iran would be extremely difficult. Iran's geography, strategic position, and extensive network of allied groups significantly enhance its capacity to retaliate. Any short-term attack could easily spiral into a prolonged and costly conflict. Rather than a large-scale war, a surgical operation against Iran appears to be the more realistic scenario under consideration. According to reports, President Trump has already been presented with military options, including potential raids on targets inside Iran. Notably, after the violent suppression of protests in Iran, Trump directly targeted Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Most recently, the influential U.S. magazine Time dedicated its new cover to Khamenei. The cover features a caricature accompanied by the phrase, "After the Ayatollah," a message widely interpreted signaling Washington's long-term intentions. It can be assumed that Washington seeks the complete dismantling of Iran's sphere of influence across the Middle East, stretching from Yemen to the Mediterranean. A compliant Iran would enable unprecedented dominance by the United States and its allies in the region, tighter control over global energy routes, and the further isolation of major powers such as China and Russia. To achieve this goal, Washington appears to be relying on a domino effect, believing that the collapse of Iran's ruling elite would trigger internal disintegration, potentially leading either to ethnic fragmentation or the rise of more moderate political forces. This explains why the U.S. is not preparing for a conventional war, but instead pursuing a hybrid campaign aimed at weakening the Iranian state from within. Amid ongoing threats and regime change rhetoric from Washington, Iran has been sending mixed signals. While Iran expresses willingness to engage in talks with the United States, it simultaneously warns that any military strike would ignite a regional war and emphasizes that preventing regime change remains its top priority. In this context, Iran has also signaled that it could conduct reciprocal operations through its regional allies, potentially drawing Israel and Gulf states into a broader confrontation. Moreover, any Iranian attack on targets in the Strait of Hormuz or on Gulf energy infrastructure would drive global oil and gas prices sharply higher, increase market volatility, and intensify inflationary pressure on already fragile economies. Therefore, under current conditions, any military escalation by the United States would pose serious risks not only for Iran, but for the entire region.